The mysterious death of Gino Hernandez is the latest episode that Viceland produced in their Dark Side of the Ring series. And you start the documentary off with people close to Gino Hernandez, including his mother, and I think it was his ex-wife, talking about his death, and his mother states emphatically that she believes that her son was murdered. We hear about the rise of Gino Hernandez in world-class championship wrestling, and the 80s are just a cesspool of drug use in the wrestling world. My God, you had all the deaths with the Von Erichs, you had Gino's death, lots of drug use. I'm really happy that the business has changed. But we see several stars in the industry talking about Gino becoming a big name, how he turned heel. His mother and some family members are talking about him being a heel and how awkward it was, and there'd be girls who'd be mad at them at wrestling events. And his mother still calls him by Gino. She doesn't call him Charles. His real name's Charles. It's not Gino Hernandez. And he's not Hispanic. He is white. His father was white, but they divorced. And then his mother remarried to a Hispanic man who was Luis Hernandez. And Gino got into wrestling because of him. And he was a wrestler before Gino. And he followed in his footsteps. His mother still calls him Gino to this day when she ever refers to him. We hear from Janice Gillespie, who was an ex-wife of Gino. And his ex-wife is talking about how good of a difference he was as a real person, was a good man, and as a heel wrestler, and how she'd even become frightened because he was just so compelling. And looking at Gino, I immediately think of Ric Flair, and he's almost like the dark-haired brunette version of Nature Boy Ric Flair. And many believe if Gino hadn't died, he'd be as big as Flair. I don't believe it because Flair was so great and he just did so much. He was around for so long. It's hard to believe anyone would be like that, including Gino. But there's no doubt if Gino Hernandez does not die, he's a major star in the wrestling industry and to become a bigger star than he already was. And he was already a big name. So we're really learning about how he hanged with the wrong crowds in Houston and in Dallas. There's a mob there and a mafia basically, and he's hanging with a lot of drug dealers, and he's with a certain crowd that's really gonna, you make a wrong move, you say the wrong thing, you're shot in the back of the head. It's the mob, it's the mafia. He's with them. He's with the wrong people, and he's doing drug use. He's sleeping with women at a crazy rate. There's photos of him that he dated Farrah Fawcett for a while, so he's a major star. There's one-night stands, there's just constant drug use, and it's really bad. He's in Las Vegas, and it gets just to a point where he could have been murdered, but it's just so easily. He could have just overdosed. This kind of drug use, at that kind of rate, that leads to death. There's no doubt about it. Could he have been murdered? Absolutely. And I'll get some more of the details as this documentary progresses. But the amount of drug use that you're going to do at such a short period of time, of course you can overdose. So we get to Gino's death. He's found in his apartment after he was not responding to calls from his mother, from the company World Class. He was missing events. Eventually, he is found. And they see him in his apartment, and his body was decomposed because he had been dead on his apartment floor for about 4 to 5 days. There was no signs of drugs in his apartment. We don't know, they didn't get to if it's in his system, but there's no signs of drugs near him. There is a gun on the floor. He was not shot, obviously, but there is a gun on the floor that he purchased because he was being followed by 2 guys. And he even tells a story to David Manning, who was a referee at World Class, about the guys who were stalking him, and 2 guys were in the back of his car, and he was just really worried that someone was trying to kill him, and that was the night that he died. His mother finds out from a wrestler who was there, who found him, and she's devastated, obviously. But later that day, she gets a visit from a man in a cowboy hat. She said it's a big guy, and he's talking to her about funeral expenses, and he's even saying, Gino owed me a lot of money, but don't worry, I'm going to take care of his funeral. That is one of the most eerie things I have ever heard. The mother and the daughter are grieving, and that's what she gets, and she admits she was terrified. It seemed like a threat, and it really feels like when you paint that picture, this guy owed money to someone, but the guy murdered him because of the money owed, and then he's found dead, and he tells the mother he's going to take care of the funeral as a way to almost make good with the mother so she would never expect him. But he made a mistake there because she now thinks he could have been involved in Gino's death. It's a big funeral. There are many wrestlers there. His mother even says she dressed up like a movie star. And she was actually a model before she met Gino's dad before that. So she dresses up really nice to a funeral, to her son's funeral. It might be strange, but that's how she had, the mentality she had at the time. All the wrestlers are there. Bruce Pritchard tells the story at the funeral that it's a platinum casket and it's a closed casket. So it's not like a funeral first when they have the open casket and then the closed casket. There's a one service and it's closed, which is strange. But then again, you think, all right, Gino had a badly decompressed corpse when he was found because he had been dead for 4 to 5 days. So he looks horrible, and maybe they don't want to show him in that way to everyone to remember him by. So that does make sense in that way if you think about it. But at the same time, there is something that you kind of think, someone like him, it's not going to be open casket, and it does add more credence to the theory that he could have been murdered because no one really saw his body. We see a story that Bruce Pritchard tells of 5 guys who are all dressed up in suits, and they toast Gino's death. And there are so many, all the funeral expenses are paid by different guys that Gino knew, but we see 5 guys that they all toast to his casket and they drink. And you might think that's disrespectful. In a way, it's almost done to honor somebody. However, it does add fuel to the fire, that the theory that he could have been murdered. And Gino's mother talks about how she's still scared to this day about who killed her son, who she believes killed him. And there was even a guy that she had never known who was doing the eulogy for Gino, and he was a drug dealer. They go to several wrestlers talking about Gino's death. There's people who say Andre the Giant said Gino Hernandez was shot in the head, which is just not true because that was not in the police report at all. So, again, not true. But Andre believes that. One thing that shows how believable World Class Championship was at the time is Chris Adams, who had teamed with Gino, and in the storyline, Gino threw a substance in his eyes, blinding him, and people thought that Chris had murdered Gino, and there was wrestlers calling the Houston Police Department to report that Chris was responsible, and they even had to question Chris. So that tells you how real wrestling was to people and how much that has been missed, because if you believe that, that shows you, even some fans who might know it's not real, but you had so many fans who are so sure of someone's death, being a murder for revenge, that shows you how powerful wrestling was and how real it was to people. So they're talking about his death, and there was so much cocaine in his body that it was 5 times that it takes for someone to overdose. That makes you think there's no way in hell he could have survived with that much cocaine in his body. So did someone put the cocaine in his body? Did they insert cocaine through his nose into his system to make it seem like a cocaine overdose? That makes you wonder. And his autopsy report's fake because that's not him. They say he's an obese male. He's not obese. Look at him. And they say he's a Hispanic male. Again, he's a Hispanic last name, but he's not Hispanic because his real name's Charles Wolf. He was white. He has a white father. He has a Hispanic stepfather. So that's again proven false. The autopsy reports were strange. They never get to see his body. The family never sees Gino's corpse. That's another thing. So when you put everything together, it seems like it's almost like the whole city, the highest, most powerful people in the city are in on this. And they have control over the morgue, they have control over the police department, they have control over the funeral staff. It feels like a mafia hit. He pissed off the wrong people. And Jake the Snake Roberts says he thinks Gino messed with the wrong people and pissed someone off, owed someone a lot of money, and that's what probably happened. There's even a theory that he wanted to fake his death. He talked about faking it to his wife. I don't believe that. That I'm sure he said that, but I don't think that actually happened. I don't think he really faked his death. David Manning now gets the story of Gino, the guy who found him. He dumps the cocaine. There was a huge bowl of cocaine that Gino had stored, and he immediately dumps it. So that automatically gets rid of the drugs that were there. And maybe to protect Gino and to protect the business, he decided to kill the drugs, get rid of them before the police can see it. So they get to the guy who did the eulogy for Gino, and he is being interviewed here. He wants his identity secret. He don't see his face. He don't see his voice. It's just basically text on the screen. I think it's a voiceover. I'm pretty sure that's not his actual voice. And they're asking him questions about Gino's death. And this is John Royal, and he is really going hard that Gino was not murdered and it was a drug overdose. And after John Royal, we get to a guy called Anonymous, who knows Gino, but he won't show his name. He won't say his face, or show his face, and he has a voiceover, so it's not his actual voice. So there's a pretty emotional moment when Anonymous, he really speaks directly to Gino's mother and his family to tell them that do not worry, he was not murdered. It was an accident. It was a drug overdose. He had been doing a lot of drugs at the time. He had been drinking a lot of alcohol, and he believes that Gino went to a bar, went to a nightclub late that night that he died, drank a lot, came back home, did drugs, and died that way, of a mix of a deadly combination of alcohol and drugs. And the mother seems to believe him. It's like she believes he was murdered at the beginning. Now she's thinking, it's nice to believe, or nice to know that I don't have to worry anymore. I still have my daughter. So she seems to be convinced, she really believes this guy, and this guy really seemed believable here. He didn't want his face shown. His voice was dubbed over, so he really lays it down. It's like he speaks directly to the family. He really wanted them to know not to worry and to know that it was a drug overdose and he was murdered. So the documentary ends, and it really leaves you with the doubt that there's no doubt he was not murdered and it was a drug overdose. So overall, I thought it was a great documentary. I like how it ended. I like how the mother finally gets some closure at the end. She says thank you to the Viceland people for doing the documentary with her, and thank you for her in a way that she's saying thank you for finally allowing this documentary to give me some closure to the death of her son. Gino's daughter has 5 kids now, so it is a happy ending. The family has grandkids and his legacy, It's one of those situations, he's not alive to see it, but his death did not ruin the lives of his family members, and it is really sad. The guy would have been an even bigger star had he never passed away. So I liked how it ended, with the mother getting closure, and as a documentary, this might have been the best one. I don't know how to really rank them. I might do it after the next review and rank all 6, but this has just been great. I really enjoyed the series, and this might have been my favorite episode. So this is a great episode to watch. The mysterious death of Gino Hernandez is a must-see for any wrestling fan.